Yes, indeed, and that's our focus this morning. Now we're joined by Dr. Tunji Ogunyemi, who is a budget historian. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
The president, I think he was just looking ahead. Look, in case these guys on Sunrise Daily are going to look at this matter, are you one of those who will say, we've heard this before, Mr. President? You want to see how will they implement it?
Of course. Implementation is always key to any budget. But one is thankful, at least, the budget has come. And the National Assembly has also promised the nation of expeditious passage. So those two factors, at least, they are cheering off.
But those two, we can say, we've heard before.
Of course, we've heard
because,
it before.
I mean, if they pass the budget early,
yes,
what kind of impact will that have? Because if you still look at it, the recurrent expenditure is still higher than capital expenditure, although the capital expenditure increased 9% this year compared to the previous ones.
No, not 9%. It's actually 225%. Don't forget, last year we had 4.49 trillion naira.
And now we have 1.8.
Yes, out of which only about 550, approximately 600 billion was for capital expenditure. But this year, 1.8 trillion. That's about 2.5 times more than what we had last year.
But the big part of that is, yes, we see all those figures, the budget, and we'll come to the part where the man out there will say, look, okay, how is it going to affect me? But the one this year, I see a lot of experts talk about how are they going to fund it?
The funding of the budget, I think the president explained, but the funding of this year's budget, I pray come very easy.
Very easy?
Yes, I pray. I pray.
Oh, okay.
Because check out oil, our crude oil is $38 according to MTF, that's medium-term expenditure framework. But we know for sure that crude oil is selling for about $36 now, and probably may even fall further. But the president has not based the expectation for revenue in respect of this budget only on oil. In fact, not significantly on oil.
Yeah,
for the first time since 1972. 1972 was the year that oil overshot customs and excise revenue in terms of the revenue profile of Nigeria. Since 1972, this is the first time that oil will account for less than a quarter of the total income of the Nigerian Federation.
Because a lot of people, yes, amazing. Did it also surprise you, knowing full well that it dropped before he presented the budget, knowing full well that they had already pegged it at $38, yes, and it dropped below that, yes, before the presentation, yes, and he still went ahead?
Yes. What that means actually is that the president is sticking to his MTF, his medium-term expenditure framework, which permits him to budget based upon $38. Probably the president is optimistic that the price will increase by mid-2016. But be that as it may, the deficit level in the budget is 2.2 trillion, and that will be funded from two main sources: domestic 980 billion and foreign 900 billion. What that means is that this budget will be driven more by tax and loans.
It goes back to Chamberlain's first question. How realistic is this budget?
Oh, it's fairly realistic, because it is not built upon the fluctuating prices of crude oil in the international market, but on tax effort. And when it is built on tax effort, it's realizable. Very realizable.
That's a little bit, because I know they talked about the different components of that tax now,
yes,
but I don't know. Is it a good thing, or do we expect them to not just enforce the collection on payments of tax, but increase?
No, once you base your revenue on tax effort, it's not necessarily going to be on increase, but expanding the base. That is, those who were not covered before will now be covered. And then you ensure that leakages in the system are also blocked. This is how to increase your tax effort.
But do we have an estimate in terms of those leakages and how much exactly can be recovered from those leakages so they can plan with it? Is it possible?
Yes, it is possible. You check out FIRS, our revenue cash cow, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Nigerian Customs Service, Nigerian Communications Commission, NNPC. These already have new heads now, And with the moral agent that is there.
The leakages.
The leakage, of course.
He made mention of all these agencies in that particular budget.
Those are the key ones.
And these moral agents are the ones that are to drive the machinery for blocking the leakages. And that's very important. FIRS, for example, has moved very, very, very strongly to increase the level of income.
Was it last year or 2 years ago that their revenue profile was, I think, 3 trillion naira, the FIRS? They've got that potential to get
FIRS, the non-oil income for the Nigerian Federation this year has not passed, accounted for about 40%, 48%. That's close to half of the total income of the Federation. And they've made good about that.
And in terms of the leakages, if I remember properly, I think when Speaker Bankole was there, I can't remember which particular year now, but he did say there was this, I think 200 million naira? No, I think 200 billion, I think.
That's a 504 billion naira saved for the Federation.
Unspent budgetary that wasn't spent.
No, the one that was saved by the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission was in excess of 500 billion.
And then did President Yar'Adua also, there was one that they saved, which they didn't spend. I think they did roll it over to the next year.
Each time you have excess, you have an excess of your spending capacity. That is, what you have budgeted for, you are not able to, to use all of them. The law says you should return to Treasury. But what happens in the ministries is that they warehouse those funds. They keep it in parastatals over which they have supervisory authority, and then expend this money without appropriation.
We're looking at a breakdown now on the screen.
Yes.
First, let's leave defense and just come back to education.
Yes.
That's another area I know you have great interest. Looking at what they have for education is about 369 billion. Do you think that can take us out of the woods in terms of fixing?
That is salutary. You see a budget that invests heavily in the intellectual world, in teaching, in research, in intellectual product, the intellectual industry. That's a good budget. That's a budget that actually will touch the ordinary man in the streets. Don't forget, the president also said that we're going to recruit 500,000 teachers. I said it on this platform, that the problem of unemployment in this country has passed the level of fit and start. Government must just do something fundamental. And government is now going to recruit 500,000 teachers.
That's huge.
That's huge. And they'll be recruited from the ranks of Nigerians, not foreigners. So that's significant. And that explains why the revenue or the expenditure on education is actually very high this year, more than 360 billion. And it's the most spent on with respect to federal.
We'll come back to that first, but here we also see some of the budget assumptions. We've talked about the predicated on the $38
benchmark.
And now, I think it's about, you said 36 or 31?
Yes, about 36. No, 36.
Now it's going to 36.
36.
And it's still fluctuating?
Yes.
It could still go a little lower. But then production estimate for this one, 2.2 million barrels per day, and then they'll go ahead and improve their tax collection. But if you take it back to education, yes, it's got the highest so far.
Yeah, the highest allocation.
And then the specifics now. Yes, they budgeted. Yes, they say they will employ people in those areas. But shouldn't we expect things like, in terms of how it affects people, why are Nigerian parents sending their children abroad to go study? Where are they going? What do they look for? With this budget, now we've got the highest. Are we looking to make a significant impact in those areas?
Surely, yes. This budget proposes to concentrate on 3 areas that will touch the ordinary man in the streets. The first is infrastructure. The second is employment. And the third is on the living conditions of the ordinary man. I mean, what else? Because government exists for the welfare and the security of the people. And no budget should be made outside of these main purposes of government. So we expect it, that this government will impact. It's an expectation. But the problem we've always had, and particularly with respect to this year, next year's budget, which the president just read, is in the 3 debilitating factors that will most likely confront this budget. Number 1, just last Friday, the United States of America lifted the ban on the export of its own crude.
The 40-year ban.
40-year ban. And what that means is that it will now add more supply to the world market. and it will further crash the price.
And Angola overtook Nigeria in Africa's oil production.
Oh, yes, but of course, but then at least we still have our 2.2 million barrels per day. That's significant. Now, the second one is that the prices has continued to fall. And then the third, the price of crude oil have continued to fall. And then the third problem is that implementation. Implementation is always the problem. Yeah, and when you talk of implementation of the budget, it's actually the implementation of the capital side. If it is the recurrent expenditure, of course, salaries will be paid, allowances will be paid, overhead costs, yes. But when we speak of implementation of the budget, we refer to that 30% portion of that expenditure plan, the extent of which it will go. So you don't have to write the budget and then you refuse to release money for the implementation of the capital contents of that budget.
I'll come back and see how we can pick your legal cap, talking about political and legal implication of having to see the president present the budget personally there. But before that, let's see all these figures, how they amount to something to the ordinary Nigerian. The traditional presentation of budget is a perennial thing, it's a tradition. You get to see that almost on a daily basis. But the average Nigerian there, who is going to pick up a copy of the daily, or who is just going to hear the news second hand or third hand and say, the president has presented a budget, how does he feel this impact of this budget that has been termed change?
The first of all is that he will look straight into the proportion of the total expenditure allocated to capital. Last year, the proportion of expenditure allocated to capital expenditure was less than 20%. This year, next year, 2016, next year, 2016, it will be 30%. Immediately, he knows that this will touch him because the capital expenditure drives growth. It drives development. It also drives the creation of wealth. So the ordinary man will feel impacted by the proportional increase, significant proportional increase in the allocation to the capital budget. The second one is in the direct allocation to employment. Government will be employing people directly. This will also touch the ordinary man. And then, of course, when it comes to the issue of tax, the ordinary man may also feel, well, I'm going to pay more now, but then I'm going to pay more for infrastructure. So that will also touch him.
Is it sorry again, is it almost the same? For instance, we're getting to see 433.4 billion for works, power and housing,
Yes.
almost the same thing as what the minister did say. Recall that Mr. Fashola did say something about trying to pay some of the contractors that have stopped work in that particular ministry.
Yes.
Perhaps when they go back to site, it's going to open up a lot of issues, a lot of openings for people who are unemployed.
Yes, that's actually the reason why the capital expenditure had been increased. You see, look, the capital expenditure is so fundamental to the ordinary man because it is not those of us that are touched directly by the budget in terms of allocation, salaries, wages. We are just about between 5 and 6% of the total population of the Nigerian nation. The rest are actually outside of the budget. The only way you could touch them is by capital expenditure, creation of, building of bridges, construction of roads, building of schools, hospitals, clinics, and then etc., etc., and then security. And government has prioritized this time around by allocating the highest proportion of its recurrent expenditure to education.